Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Sunday, May 10th here. Um, I was originally going to I'd start the video. I mean, the clips I started to start the video with yesterday on Saturday. Funny, mocking politicians, and then I get into a voiceover about my family and things, and these are significant days for me: the 9th, the 10th, the 17th. These are days my children were born, three of them in May, and so I talk about that a little bit. But, you know, I occurred to me that I want to talk about something here or emphasize how I'm willing to talk about things other people aren't, right? Some people are willing to talk about some things, but not all of them. I don't really follow other truthers. And, these are fundamental truths that need to be said that anybody really can understand, anybody with any sort of critical thinking skills. And this isn't about some complex math problem or something, right? This isn't about some kind of sophisticated, upper level Mensa kind of concepts. These are things that pretty much everybody can understand. Like if you can balance a checkbook, if you can manage your family's finances or your own finances, then you can understand this, right? The first part. And then if you just have a basic sense of social dynamics and how people manipulate other people and, power structures and things, just, like the bare basics, you can understand pretty much the rest of it. So this isn't about people's capacity to understand what I'm about to say. It's about their willingness to accept it, right? What it means to them when you hear these things. So the first part, which is, the most remedial, is about why America is going to war with Iran and what we did with Venezuela. Like, why those two places, right? Now, Trump has talked shit about grabbing Greenland. It's another thing, right? As well. So you think about these are the places that Trump is targeting: Greenland, Venezuela, and Iran. Now, what do Iran and Venezuela have in common? They have a shit ton of oil, amongst other resources. I mean, that's what jumps out, right? If you were going to invade a country and take it over, if you were going to, um, if you were going to take over if you're going to put the effort into expending lives and money and shit, and stretching yourself thin as a nation, the old colonist model, why would you invade Venezuela and Iran? Why would you choose those two places? Well, it's because of oil. Like anybody fucking can understand that, right? Like, and there's other things there, but there has to be something of value. Why are the negotiations going so poorly there? Because Iran doesn't want to give Trump any oil, right? Like that's what's happening. And, I mean, there's whatever's left of that government, whatever, we can believe about any of this stuff, that Trump wants to get more of the oil. The negotiation would be about somehow, having rights to Iran's oil, like somehow getting a piece of the pie. I mean, that would be the only thing that Trump would negotiate on. Like, that's the only thing Trump cares about in terms of, like, if you know anything about Trump and his, shitty business savvy, he understands that there's an asset there and he wants a piece of it, right? So, like, they don't want to give Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump some kind of deal like some of these other countries have given him. It's like, why would the Rothschilds invade a country? I mean, why would they economically invade a country? So it's because they want to get one of their banks in there, right? They want to get in one of these fucking debt-based economy banks. Like, it's the other thing. That's another negotiating aspect of Iran. They don't have a central bank that's linked to all these other global banks. I mean, the axis of evil, all those countries were countries that refused to have these central banks. Libya, Gaddafi wanted to sell gold sell oil in a gold dinar. So this is the reason that Trump is in there. But why not? Why do something so desperate to unsettle the world with the Strait of Hormuz, put America on blast, create more division in America, all these things, which is, part of it. Because they're trying to lock up hard assets, right? And Greenland has a shit ton of resources too. So everything that Trump has targeted is something that it has hard assets, right? So, we have a debt-based economy, and when that collapses, Then you have commodities. You have things like oil and food. You have to sell things. You have to, people are going to want to barter. They're not going to want to, they're not going to trade in debt, right? They're not going to want to have worthless currency when the currency collapses, but they're going to want things of value. And food is valuable, and oil is valuable, and gold is valuable. And you have commodities, right? And this is what Trump is trying to lock up. And all the countries are trying to lock it up because they all know what I know, or what most of you should all know, is that the economy's fucked. And so all this stuff, things that you hear truthers talking about, you have these people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, late to the party motherfuckers, talking about something like Thomas Massey, and like something can change, but that's the reality of your situation, right? That they want hard assets, right? The hard assets are being locked up, which means that the soft, the debt-based economy, the worthless money, is going to be soon, inflated to such an extent, or whatever, devalued to such an extent that there's not going to be anything. Like, there's going to have to be hard assets, and everybody wants to glob onto them. Personally, this isn't about America. This is about Trump's grifting family getting all that they can. So I typed in the U.S. debt clock, and I meant to type in the U.S. debt clock, but I said world debt clock, and it has the it has the United States at $39 trillion in debt, but it has China at $21 trillion, Germany at $3 trillion, Japan at $11 trillion, India at $3 trillion, UK at $4 trillion. India's like 3.7, UK's 4.5, right? So let's call that 4.5 for France, 4 for Italy, Brazil at 2.4. I'm rounding up or rounding down here. Canada at 3, Argentina at billions. So now we're getting into billions. Argentina, Australia is at 1 trillion. Argentina has 600 billion. Belgium, 800 billion, right? But all these countries are in debt, right? Like scrolling down all the way to Turkey, Taiwan, right? So these countries are all millions or trillions of dollars in debt. And so then you go to the U.S. debt clock, and you see that, the debt, the U.S. debt is, so which I said 39 trillion, but that the assets, the green number that's in the top left corner, next to the red stuff, is at 5,400,000,000. So we already know from Elon Musk that we have $1 trillion a year in interest, and our bills are $7 trillion. So we have $8 trillion in debt, but we only have $5 trillion in assets. And you see all with the world clock, when going back to that, before, I'm not going to show it again. Like, I'm doing a voiceover, then I'm just going to capture the video. You see that the debt is going up. It's not going down for all these countries, right? They're not paying down the debt. It's going up. So all these countries are getting more and more in debt, and America is like the worst one. And we have no ability to pay any of that off. Like, we can't. Like, we're not, our expenses are just going to keep on going up. And the kind of cuts you would have to make to the government and the effect it would have on our economy and the global economy would be disastrous, just to pay, something. Like, just to get it go the other way, where it's going down. Like, just to get it go down. Like, cut our expenditures to under $5 trillion. That we don't spend anything under, and there's unfunded liabilities that aren't listed here. They took those off once Trump became president. But that's, Social Security and Medicaid, Medicare, and that's like $200 trillion. So, we're completely fucked economically. And I'm not an economic person. I've said this many a time. I'm probably average or slightly above average in math. I don't know. Like, based on, just from high school. Like, I do very little math. I know I was good at geometry. I aced geometry, right? And I, did well in math without really trying. So I think I'm probably, average or slightly above average in math. But I'm not good at all in business. All my friends in college were taking business classes, and I just had a sort of a aversion to business, like just all of it. money and these things. I just didn't like it. Don't want to know about it. Like sticking my fingers in my ears and not just not wanting to hear about it. Right. I went through my own financial crisis, bouncing checks when I became a young adult in college. Not being economically stable. But as I got older, I had to come to terms with that. And you know, I started to take interest in it when I realized we were fucked, like economically. I started to understand assets and liabilities and, things like, whatever they were, financial crises and terms that, financial terms and, just basic understanding, not like as somebody who could be successful in business, but someone who could understand a collapse, like why our system's collapsing. I mean, I already had the other pieces. I knew, people are going in the wrong direction. People are disconnected from God, all the things that lead to, social collapse, moral collapse, economic collapse. These are all the same thing. They're all part of the same thing. Economic bankruptcy is the same as moral bankruptcy, right? Moral bankruptcy is the same as self-sabotage and addiction, right? Going against God's will. Spiritual bankruptcy. And so they're all tied together. So I have an understanding of that. Looking at it like objectively. Not what I want to have happen, but what is happening. And so when you look at the economic numbers, it's clear that we're fucked, right? We're insolvent. There's no way for us to pay back the debt. Like it's a person, if this was your family's finances, and you look at what your expenditures are, your expenditures and expenditures, you really, things that have become necessities, and all the things that you're over leveraged, and then you looked at your income and your potential income. Unless you won the lottery or some, major windfall, some incredible thing happened. You made an invention, like some kind of pie in the sky thing. There's no way you would ever be able to pay it off. And really, realistically, there was no way, even if a pie in the sky thing happened. And of course, for America, there's no lottery. There's no lottery America can win. There's no, hey, we have $40 trillion we're giving away. You buy some, each country buying these lottery tickets where they, if you win, you get $40 trillion, right, to pay off the debt. But it's so much more than that. That's not even enough. Like, America, with expenses would still be the same, and our income would still be the same. So we just accumulate more debt. And then there's, personal debt. There's over 100 million in America. Like, if your income is 500 trillion, if your income's 5 trillion, how are you going to pay off 100 trillion? And then, like I said, the unfunded liabilities and the derivatives market is always between 6 and 7 trillion. I can look at what it is now. $900 trillion, like almost a quadrillion dollars. I was like, holy shit, are you serious? Before it had always been usually 6, and then sometimes it would get up to 7. I've never seen it at 9 before. It's like, that's a major holy fuck moment here, right? I want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly in terms of trillions. Yeah, I wanted to make sure it wasn't million, but not trillion. It wasn't billions. It was billions and not trillions. It's trillions. So it's almost a quadrillion dollars. A quadrillion dollars. Does anybody, when your income is 5 trillion and your debt is a quadrillion, which is 1,000 trillion, there's more in this derivatives market than, so much more you can't even conceive of it, right? And so our debt is off the charts. It's, beyond our ability to even conceive. And there's no way to pay it off, right? So that means that they're going to have to take away assets and promises. They're going to have to, empty your bank accounts, tell you your money is worthless, your assets are worthless, and they're going to want to glom onto. What's the other thing that's happening? People are, all of a sudden they have a title to their house, and then some bank comes in and takes it, right? And so, like, that's the first piece, right? And so when you think about Israel, what is Israel's significant? So Jewish people are good at money. Not all of them. I had Jewish friends who weren't good at money, right? So, like, it's not a birthright. It's not a, Jewish people, Israel as a country, and Jewish people, it's like being Jewish is kind of like a nationality, even though there's different races and different you know, types of people that are Jewish. It's also a religion. Like, so it's a weird place. It's a weird, concept. Like, is Jewish being about genetics? Well, yeah, in some cases, but there's different kinds of Jewish people, right? There's different, types of Jews, right? And then there's, a nationality, and then there's a religion. So a religion's a choice. You can convert to Judaism, right? You could become a Jewish person. That doesn't make you automatically genetically, good at money. But, you know, Jewish people are good at money. And it was considered, like when you think about stereotypes. And when you said that Jewish people are good at money, Jewish people control Hollywood, Jewish people control the banking system, Jewish people control the media, and some of them, and like this is like again, it's not it's not all of them, it's not they're all the same, like this kind of thing, right? But when you said that, it was like, hey, that's like racist or that's anti-Semitic, and you know why would that be a bad thing? Like why would you say, hey, Jewish people are successful? They're good at inventing things, they're good at debt-based economy, but that's like a weird thing to not want people to know, right? Like no, 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 that's not true. Jewish people don't control the media. Jewish people don't control Hollywood. Jewish people don't control the financial system. Like there's no such thing. That's not, what are you talking about? But why would that, why would that be a problem? You know, Jay-Z, the rapper Jay-Z, put out this song called Ode to OJ. And it was a rap song basically talking to mostly an African American audience about, why you are not financially doing well. And there was a line where he says, "You want to know what's more important than throwing away money at a strip club? Credit. You ever wonder why Jewish people can own all the property in America? This is how they did it." And LeBron James posted this lyrics to his something or other, right? And he got all this flack for being anti-Semitic, and he said, "I don't understand. This isn't an insult, right? This is talking about you being successful." Certainly to the community that it was made for, that that if you're materialistic and people want to have more money, right? So, but there is something there, right? And again, stereotypes and generalizations don't apply to all things and all people in a certain situation. But you think about all the things that are happening in the world, and Israel being a very small country, and them able to puppet America, it's because of financial talent, right? Financial acumen. The people who we call the Zionists are good at money, right? They're good at, and when you're good at money, you're good at, money is control and these other things, right? So that's, one of the things that people won't tell you, right? Like people now are talking about, Israel a little differently. And, we couldn't talk about these things before on, social media because, that is what it is. And people want to blame Israel for the whole thing, but it's, that's the first piece. But there's something beyond that. Most people in the truth community don't want to tell you you're fucked financially. Like, there's no way to solve this problem. Because then what the fuck why are you voting? Why are you doing anything? Like, why bother participating in a sinking ship, right? Why don't you go to the bar and have a drink while the Titanic takes on water, right? Everyone else is fighting for fucking lifeboats, and you're in there, let's go, what's that? What do they have at the buffet, right? Like, so, like, why are you going to care about all these things? These people don't have a spiritual solution. They're people who are like again, I'm not saying Tucker Carlson or these other people are truthers, but Tucker Carlson is, he wants to be a Christian. He wants to talk about Christianity, legitimately or not, for example. And he wants to talk about American politics, the Republican Party, and still, a little bit about liberals and whatever, and how someone like Thomas Massey can come in and fix the system. But and that's what his audience wants to hear. But he's not going to tell you you're not financially, you're financially fucked, because then all the other stuff is like just window dressing. Like, well, if we're financially fucked, then my lifestyle is going to disappear, and our system, as we now know it, is going to collapse. So they don't say that. Like, some of us do. We're called black pilled. It's a sort of a derogatory term. Like, even within the crazy paranoid, conspiracy theorist world, black pilled people are like, a level of crazy, by saying something that people don't want to hear, right? You won't get much of an audience if you say that, because people want false hope. People love false hope. People want to, be distracted. People want to, my wife just sent me this wonderful Lego video this morning where they're talking about the UFOs. I'm going to play it after the clips I already shot today. And after my voiceover, I'll show a good portion of that. That's just a brilliant one. But, in all that, in all these things, there is, like a small amount of people that are willing to say there is no way to fix this system, right? And it starts with moral depravity. But then there's very few people, or maybe just me, that says this, right? Because, we're talking about the dominant religions right now. It's Christianity and Judaism. And then, of course, Islam being, in terms of the amount of people, right? And when you talk about those religions, it starts with the Old Testament. And very few people, if any, are willing to tell you God is not a king. God is not a king. If you are talking to really stupid people, remedial people, simple people, maybe not stupid, but simple, and you want to explain to them what God is, and, there was no abstraction, right? Like, many cultures around the world didn't have the concept of zero or nothingness, right? Zero isn't a part of their, India brought in the concept of zero. I'm not sure when it was, but, in terms of mathematics. But, the idea of negation of the self, negation of the ego, that you have an ego and a soul, and you're negating your ego to allow your soul to emerge. And the process in doing that, you have a small self and a big self. You have a small self, which is with a small s, and you have a big self with a capital S. And you're, diminishing the self, the ego, and you're allowing the self, the soul, to emerge. And the self is subtle, the bigger self, right? And so if people can't understand basic concepts, they can't even understand a soul. They can't understand abstract idea of God. Like, saying God is energy isn't even, like when you talk about the Force in Star Wars, the Force, right? But in Saj Marg, which is really sophisticated spiritual teaching, that it's the forceless force, the transmission that's given. It's the absence of power. It's the absence of everything. Like, everything comes with condition, right? Greed has a thing, and anger has a thing. They have energy. It's the lack of all those things, right? It's simple and it's subtle. God is simple and subtle. And so when you have people who are, they're not intellectual, they're simple farming people or village people or tribal people. They don't have the capacity for this level of explanation of God, right? Like, there's lots of people who can't understand a more sophisticated explanation of God. And so they say God is a king. Why? Because a king is the greatest thing that they know, right? Oh, he's a king. Oh, he's the king of kings. He's the best king. Holy fuck, he's the best king? Wow. God must be something. So that's what was told to these people, that God is king sitting on a throne somewhere. But, not weird, not as a person, right? But, they don't get into that. Like, they just say this guy's all powerful. And he's a king that if you obey him, he'll do right by you. You have to worship him and him alone. And this is what the Jewish religion is telling their people. But if you cross him, if you obey other gods, you worship other gods, you don't, you just, we do arbitrary random shit. He might just get mad at you for fucking no reason. He's going to punish the shit out of you, because that's what kings do. So, like, if you guys do what we tell you to do, because we're the voice of God, we're telling you what God wants. And if you do those things, you'll be the chosen people. you'll be, you are the God's chosen people, but you gotta fucking, everyone else is fuck those guys. They don't even have a shot, right? Just like, this same thing happened with Christianity. Oh, you didn't accept Jesus? Well, you're just some heathen fucking piece of shit. You didn't accept Jesus. You're not even a fucking human being, right? So you're not even everyone else outside of your little group, based in these motherfucking scumbags that are telling you what God is and God isn't, but they control God, and they say if you don't do what we say, God's going to punish you. And so, in the Old Testament, God is a demon. God is not. They're not accurately portraying God to you. They're not telling you what God actually is, and because they don't know, nobody really knows, right? I mean, I have a more sophisticated explanation, and God's a feeling, right? But like, the feeling's love. When you say love, you know, what does that even mean? Like, people have. I've talked about this before. There's something like 40 or 100 different words for love in the Persian language, right? With the Farsi. Is that what they speak? And then it goes through these various languages, and they have multiple words for love, right? In English, there's one, and most people, I mean, haven't felt like a true love, right? I mean, love in its highest form, like love in its in its most purest form, without conditions, unconditional love, right? The energy of love, which is God, and so an energy is again forceless force. Energy implies power, but can you really describe love, the feeling of love, like can you put it into words? You have poets and all these motherfuckers, right? But it's a feeling, like, and when people would sit in meditation in the Sajmark system, you would get doused with this transmission. But my biological brother couldn't feel it at all. I hope he can feel it now, so many years later. We both been meditating, started a month or so after I started. And he, still doing it, I think. I almost guarantee he is. We haven't talked in a while. But he couldn't feel the energy. And I couldn't understand why. And so people would all be sitting there, and they'd all be receiving the same energy, but people could feel it. Some people were more sensitive than others. I know that there are people more sensitive than me, and so we all had our own, feeling about it. So, it's something that can't be described. It's something that can't be compared to anything. Love is singular. There's nothing to compare it to. And so God is the same way. There's no way your mind can understand God. But your heart can feel God. Your heart can feel God's love. But, most people, that just doesn't do it. Like, they're not there yet. They can't, whatever it is. And so there had to be tangible ways of describing God and appealing to people's lower tendencies. You had a lot of people with the inability for abstract thought, inability for higher purpose. The majority of people are like first timers. This is like their first life here, whatever, as a human, whatever it might be. So animalistic tendencies, and so things had to be described in the form of power and in the form of punishment and fear and rewards and why you would do something, why you would do a religion. And so these are false religions because as time goes on, they get more and more about material power, religious power, and manipulating people and bending them to their will than anything to do with God. In fact, God is absent in these religions, and they are hell bent on making sure you don't experience real God, right? Real love. So my wife and I watched The Farmer, Wants a Wife, Farmer Son, whatever it is. There's 3 different versions that I know of. There's one that they just started in Canada, which is so liberal, it's hilariously bad. And then there's multiple seasons in Australia. I think that's where it began as a franchise. And then there's the one in America. And my wife and I have watched whatever amount of seasons. I think they started at season 7 on Hulu. And, it's not stuff that we watch like, we talk and make jokes and make fun of the people and, whatever it might be. We're not invested in it. And there's things that I notice about, and we're just finishing season 13. And the thing with the Australian one, you can see how people have changed over the years. And there's so much more drama, and the girls cry at the drop of a hat, and they're all emotionally fucked. I mean, they're all, messed up. But there's been a few narratives here where the girls were like telling their farmer that they're falling in love with him is like them risking something, like them opening up and by saying, "Hey, I'm falling in love with you," like admitting their feelings to the farmer is somehow, "Oh my God, I'm so brave," like this kind of thing. And it's the stupidest thing ever. So there's two things about it, right? What does falling in love with you mean? Like, is that where, like, is it 2 weeks away? Like, are you either in love or not in love, right? You either love somebody or you don't. Like, what does that even mean, right? Like, what does that even fucking mean? Like, people say I love you all the time. Do they mean it? Do they know what it means? What is love? Have they ever experienced love? What do they know about love? Do they even feel, do they have any connection to their hearts at all, right? There was a girl that's on the show who's really emotionally manipulative and completely fucked up. And she's got this farmer, to whatever extent this show's real, kind of wrapped around her finger. And she reminds me of my ex and of Erica Kirk. And the other girl kind of confronted her and said, "Where do your feelings come from?" And she goes, "Well, my feelings come purely from my heart," right? And I can see that this girl has no connection with her heart because she's emotionally manipulative, right? So, people have feelings of happiness that they think is love, but that's not love, right? People have whatever it is. But if you're saying you're falling in love just with somebody, what does that mean? You like them more than you did before? Like, you either feel love or you don't. Like, love is either there or it's not. Love emerges. Like, love can be there and you just don't feel it. Like, the example would be you love your family, but you don't feel it. You might say it once in a while, and you don't feel it every moment. The love isn't there. And then one of your kids or your spouse gets in a car accident, and you rush over there. I mean, there's fear and there's anxiety, but then the love is there. Like, people say, if somebody goes away, like you get into your mundane routine, and your spouse leaves for a week or so, and they come back, and you can feel the love. You can feel how much you miss them, how much you can feel it in your heart, right? So sometimes love's there, but it doesn't. You don't feel it. It emerges, and so it's a very complicated thing. But Master Charji, one of the first great teachings I heard from him, he said, what is this falling in love? Why do you fall in love? You rise in love. Like it makes it sound like love is some shitty thing that you're falling into. Like you're, maybe because of lack of control or whatever reason. I mean, he didn't say that, but, that's what I assume. I'm falling in love, or are you rising in love? Is love ennobling? Is it, is something that brings you to a higher level? Is love beyond, the normal conditions? Is it somehow above? Why aren't you rising in love, right? Brilliant thing. Like he said this years and years ago. I think that maybe other people have said similar things later on. But, this is, a brilliant concept that you rise in love. So, people don't really have the capacity to really talk about God because they don't really have much experience with love in its, in its unadulterated form, without anything that, that appeals to your ego. Love is unconditional. You can be a piece of shit and people can feel love for you. Like, your love isn't something like, I mean, all the people in my family, my kids are estranged, and my brother. I mean, I'll have I feel love for them. Like, there's love in my heart for them, and I wish them well. I don't maybe like them as people. We don't have any real connection in terms of our where we are in life and our past, and don't really want to spend time with them, whatever it is. But I feel love for them, right? Like I said, you'll hear later on that my daughter commits suicide. Her birthday was May 9th, and her older brother, both born on consecutive Mother's Day, a year apart. She was born on Sunday, May 9th, in 1999. He was born on Sunday, May 10th, on 1998. And, I mean, we're not, in contact or whatever, but I feel love for them, And so love isn't about how great you are. Like, how I mean, you might love your parents, and your parents sucked, right? But you feel some love in them. They die, and you feel some sense of loss, right? You feel something in your heart. Love is there, but love is not something that, people love shitty people all the time. And there's great people that have nobody that loves them, right? And so, like, it's not about your ego. Like, love has nothing to do with your ego. In fact, your soul and your condition of your heart and your ability to love is thwarted or blocked or you know somehow filtered through a shitty ego, like an ego that all-encompassing ego. Someone with a lot of success, material success, doing really well in the material world has trouble connecting with their soul and their heart and their capacity to love, right? And so, with all these types of things, God is love. People say God is love, which is true. What is that? Like, how do what does that even mean? Like, to, everybody, it's based in their capacity to feel love. And if people don't have a developed heart, it doesn't matter what kind of personality you have. It doesn't matter how fucking smart you are. It doesn't matter about any of those things. It matters like how developed your heart is, how much you've connected with God, and how willing you are to allow your ego. Is willing to let go and let the love emerge. And also shutting off your brain and these things and dropping down into a more feeling state. Not a down inward, dropping inward. Again, the down and like make it sound low, dropping into inward into a deeper state of of feeling, right, of connection to God. And so, this idea that God is not a king and that they've been lying to you, and the Old Testament is a horrible description of God, and then the New Testament isn't much better. Well, that'll lose you your audience, right? Like that, who's going to watch my videos? I'm all the Christians that are in the truth community, and and then the atheist liberals, like, who are, they want to reject it altogether. And so, like, I mean, people aren't going to say those things. They're thinking about what their audience can and cannot hear. They're thinking about their own limited ability to deal with how much of we've all been deceived. But our fundamental teachings are about our relationship to divinity. Everything's built on a foundation of your understanding of God. And our understanding of God is a demon. Like, that's, all the people who are Christians and Muslims and Jews, they're all worshiping a demon. And of course, there's problems with the other religions as well. Because they're all power groups. They manipulate their, there's all charlatans and scumbags and people who are using God as a way to, embolden their egotistical pursuits of greed and power and the rest of it. So these are things people won't tell you. They don't even understand. They can't see it. Like, who talks about the Old Testament in this way, but also talks that, like, Jesus is legitimate, like, as a saint, and that there is a God. It's just that, people go the other way, right? Like, there's that guy's Penn and Teller, and that guy Penn, I believe it is, the guy who doesn't talk, the guy who does talk, the big guy. He really seems to be like a Satan worshiping piece of shit. Like, and he blasts the Old Testament, but he blasts the Old Testament like, well, since the Old Testament is bullshit, then God is bullshit. I've heard Bill Maher say similar things. Bill Maher had a movie called Religiosity, where he found dumb fuck, piece of shit, crazy people who are religious and made fun of them. But then again, he always backs Israel. He backs the Jewish people because he's Jewish, but he doesn't believe in God, right? And so, you have these kind of things. But, people won't tell you the truth about these religions. And, if you don't confront that, then you can't be an honest person, because that's your fundamental understanding of life and pursuit of your goals in life. And, your relationship to God is everything. So there's things that, because of these things that I'm willing to say, and, there's other things that go along with it, I don't believe that anybody talks about things like this. There's some things that are similar, in terms of, again, I don't listen to other truthers, but based on the comment section. And also, there's one more thing I guess I should say about this, right? So if, these things I'm saying are true, which they are, that would make me the best truther and the best truther channel out there. There's people who say this, who get it, right? And, you know, up until I was 29 years old, I had a failed life. I was a failure as a person, as a human being. I was underachieving in every capacity. Whatever I was in terms of relationships, in terms of a career, in terms of my relationship to God, in terms of my, everything, like, just functioning. Like I was a negative person, making the world a worse place, just sucking up resources and contributing pretty much, very little, right? I could make people laugh, so, those kind of things, right? I would do things for other people. Sometimes I'd hang out with my nephews and nieces, like, 1 or 2 days a year for most of them. My brother's kids a little bit more because they were older and we would play basketball and, things like that. But really not really benefiting or influencing anything in a positive way. A lost person, functioning on a low level of capacity, more so than most people. Some people have something they're contributing to society. People are good at something, right? But, just a worthless person. And after finding Saj Marg, I was able to do things to make the world a better place. Multiple things. I'm not going to list them all. But it was only due to the blessing of finding the Saj Marg system. And it's what makes this channel special. It makes like I'm funny. I'm clever. I'm smart. I have some abilities, right? I don't. It's not like I don't bring anything to the table. But without Saj Marg, I would be worthless. Like this would be, without God, I would be a negative person, and you would listen to this and you would feel worse. But many people listen to my videos and feel better. So, there is a system out there that took somebody who was, a negative functioning person and made them into a higher functioning person, like above average functioning person. My capacity to deal with problems and stress and whatever it is, my understanding of life and, whatever talents I have, maximizing them, my ability to love, right? My capacity to love. I mean, more than anything else, right? Just my wife and I did our Sunday meditation this morning, and, I could just feel all this love in my heart, like just, flowing through it, just, infinite amounts of love, like just, love is infinite, but my heart's like bursting with love, like just all this feeling of love in my heart. And I just, gave her a hug after we meditated. And I just wanted all of it to pour into her, whatever it is, right? Or into this, video, like the love that is there. So, all that, a person's capacity to love is the highest thing, beyond any sort of talent you might have. The ability to, your ego to get out of the way and let God's love flow through you is the highest thing that anybody can do for the world and anything else, right? And so, it's what the Saj Marg system does. I mean, people who are really good Christians, like really good, like, devout Christians and borderline spiritual, but they're still being pulled downwards because of their bullshit beliefs and the way that God is, the religious beliefs. So they can't tell you what I'm telling you because they won't confront the bullshit, the number one thing that they've been deceived on. And if everything's a lie that you've been told, which it is, to whatever extent, you haven't been told the truth about anything, how are they going to tell you the truth? Like if they can't deal with their own bullshit religion, they can't deal with the bullshit Old Testament, right? And, sadly, the Saj Marg method, which is, I mean, amazing. There are people who, I thought were much better at this than I am, the Saj Marg meditation. People with better personalities and more generous and more, caring of other people and more, just devoted, more, working harder at it, putting more energy into it, more devoted to serving God, like just thinking about how to serve God, more than I do, right? At least, you can't judge other people's internal worlds, but I could see there were people better at this than I was, which I was grateful for. Like it was, it's, you don't ever want to be the best. I mean, it's a lonely thing to be the best, the master of the system is a lonely person, right? And then you're just, where do you go when you need help, right? Where do you go? You want to have people above you that when you get overwhelmed, that you can go to them, and they can help you, people who are wiser, a grandfather, an elder, in this case, the spiritual master, but we had preceptors and people, The people you can go to and turn to when you're like struggling, because everyone goes through things. You need people, you need elders, you need whatever. And then you become that elder, and then, then everybody you looked up to is in the etheric world, and you have to go up there to connect with them, which is, a blessing in itself, but that's something. But, these people, when this guy Dodgy turned out to be a piece of shit, they couldn't admit it. And they can't admit certain other things, and they're scared of the prophecies that are given about, what's happening. Like, they can't hear the things that I'm saying here. Even though it's everything that I'm saying here is based in the Sajmark meditation. And it's, not just teachings, but the energy and things. They can't watch my videos. They wouldn't understand them because they don't have that capacity, which is very sad for me, right? And so, like, I'm a singular voice in this thing, that someone who has had the blessing of the Sajmark meditation and, was a worthless person without it, and then now has been able to, create this content and share, information that is crucial for people. And yet, my videos get, right now, I'm down to 3,000 views a month. I mean, a video, not a month. I'm making almost daily videos. The last video I put up last night is on 2,400. The video after that is 3,600. And the video after that is 3,500. And then it goes back up at some point to 400. And 4,000, I'm sorry. All these are thousands. And then, some had 5 and 4, so they were up for a while. But, even 5,000 people. Like, think about all the people in the truth community, and not because of anything that, special about me, but the things that I've said, that my videos are the best. Like, because you get truths here that people aren't willing to talk about. People aren't willing to tell you you're fucked economically and you're fucked spiritually. And then these other things, and talk about, things that are very dear to people. And, the Christians can't hear shit because they're just, wallowing in their indoctrination. Most of them, they're Christians here that know that I'm telling them the truth, but they, whatever. They can't deal with the Old Testament bullshit and the problems with their religion. They're sticking to a remedial book that they think is some kind of word of God, when it's just, a lot of it's bad, and the stuff that's good is just, spirituality 101. They can't make the jump from religion to spirituality. And then you have people who can't do any of that stuff. They're not even religious, and they have no, inclination to find divinity within them. And there's nothing compelling them to do so or to search for it. And, aside from my channel, there's the Sajmark method out there that's crumbled because of the piece of shit Dodgy who wrecked the organization. But the method is out there, and you can always connect to God, whether there's a method or not. Well, there's a system. You can really legitimately go inside and connect to God internally. But in all that, right? In all that, we're all the people. Like, if there was 1 million people that listened to me and could understand what I'm saying and feel it and, aspire to be spiritual, that would be nothing. Like, there's fucking 8 billion people. Like, and like, not that it has to be me, but like, whatever. Like, just listen to this stuff that's being said by me. And it's not like I'm the only person that, for these specific things, because of the, there's so few people that do the Sajmark system, and there's no real truthers like in the Sajmark system, right? There's some, there's always some, like, but they're not, they're not truthers like I am. Even my brother was an old school OG truther, and he can't say the things I say because he hasn't had the experience. He doesn't feel the energy. He doesn't have the capacity as a spiritual person that I have, right? So, it is what it is. But, most of the things I'm saying here are an introduction to the spiritual life. It's like spirituality 101. Just, a fundamental message here that God's inside of you and God's your friend, right? I wrote the book, My Friend Within, for kids, but it also could be for adults. That God is your friend and God's inside of you. A true friend, beyond like what people think about friendship. A friend who, is the highest friend, right? Friend in the sense that God wants everything good for you, right? Like a friend that's a blessing, a blessing as a friend. And it's God's right inside of you. So why not cultivate a relationship with God inside of you? Why don't Christianity tell you that? Why the fuck doesn't Christianity tell you that? Why doesn't every religion, and they do more in the Hindu religion, but why doesn't everybody believe that? Why doesn't everybody know that? A very simple concept that there's, something, that we refer to as God. God, an essence of love, a consciousness that's, pure and simple and just 100% positive, like in terms of, wanting like you to evolve and want to bring out the best in you, like that there's some version of you inside of yourself that's better than what you are now. If you just get out of your way and you get rid of some of your baggage and your material bullshit, you can, ascend to be something higher. Why wouldn't fucking everybody want to do that, right? I mean, I had this realization. I was tested for my IQ when I was a kid. It was like 146 or 143 or something. I mean, even if it was 130, I don't know, but it was, I was told in the 140s. I went to Yale to get this test because they thought I was like retarded, right? Because I was dyslexic. They weren't testing me for being gifted and talented. They were testing me because I was dyslexic, and they thought I was like retarded, like I was some learning disability. And so they tested me, and then my parents were kind of intimidated because I had a high IQ, and they started to realize I was smarter than them. And they were already fucking incompetent, and I was the youngest, and they already been told what piece of shit parents they were by my now adult siblings, who are all whatever, affected me in one way or another. That's neither here nor there. I talked about my head injury that I had, and I used some drugs, and I'm older. So my IQ, whatever it is, but there's a consciousness, like I am, somebody who's smarter than average, right? And then I looked it up, and I'm like, if you're 120 IQ and above, you're in the 90th percentile. And then I thought about the spiritual stuff, right? And this is something I've said fairly recently, and I was like, I know that the Sajmark system, and I know, all these things, based in, I've meditated for 20 some thousand hours or more, like 30,000 hours of meditation, like just crazy amounts, right? And just all that was there's a connection to God that's being, cultivated. And, because of that, and because of what's happened to the Sajmark system, I'm one of the top, I'm one of the 1% of the spiritual people out there, right? Spirituality is a willingness to work for God. And like people can do good deeds, but that's not true spirituality. Like, you can be generous and you can feed the hungry and, try to do miracles and shit. Like people think miracles are a big deal. They're not. Working for God is working for God. Like you go to God and God tells you what God wants you to do, right? And, and maybe it is feed people, but, it's important that like, that's not what it's about. It's not about feeding people. It's about you finding what God wants you to do and doing it without questioning, right? But the biggest part about it is you're doing it in anonymity. Like I can talk about stuff here, and I could say all the things I do, like praying every night. I pray every night at 9 p.m. that people come to spirituality. But what does that mean? Like, and how well am I doing it? But I've done this now for 30 years. I'm praying for other people to find God. But everything on the spiritual level happens on an etheric level and happens internally. And then when you connect to God, God's energy flows through you and out to the community, and in some cases out to the world, and you can feel the energy, right? And so, in all that, if I'm in the, the upper 1% of, in terms of, people's capacity for intelligence or whatever you want to call it, consciousness, and then spirituality, then we're fucked. I said this like in a recent video. Like if I'm, in the upper 1%, like I should be like in the bottom. Like I should be like, I mean, the way that I see it, right? In terms of my, me knowing my shortcomings or whatever. Like I should be on the bottom. Like I shouldn't be one of the top people. Like even in terms of the Sajmark system now, these people wouldn't watch my videos, my, what were called Abhyasis, and they're not willing to admit Daji's a piece of shit, but there's better energy in my videos and better information than they don't watch Daji's videos either, but they wouldn't watch mine, even though mine are, they have merit. They have, they can benefit you in some way, either through information, but mostly through energy and consciousness, right? And so, I know humanity's fucked because, you know, like I'm a slacker. I mean, I give it a good, I put some effort into my spiritual life, but especially now I'm kind of burnt out and, my enthusiasm's there, but not like it was when I started. When I first found, the system, I was so enthusiastic and so energized, right? And I mean, given all the things I've gone through, I mean, you have to eat shit, right? Like, I went through a horrific marriage for 18 years to only have it fail and to have my family blow up. Just, for me, it was just to remove a bitterness I had towards God. That was a suffocating condition that had to be ripped from me in the most painful fucking possible way. You have to be willing to go through shit like that, and I'm kind of willing, like, I mean, I do it, like, but I'm not, there's so much better that people can be. Then, people could put a lot more effort. I mean, I could put a lot more effort into what I do, right? In terms of my relationship with God, in terms of my commitment to service and devotion to God, right? Like, it can be all encompassing. And, I mean, I don't know what it is. I can give myself a solid C, C minus, whatever. But there's people that could do A, or I would assume there would be. There are people that have done that in the past, higher developed souls. But, people don't even want to try. Like, people don't even want to, like, almost everybody should be able to do what I do. Like, just, some people don't have the capacity for abstract thought. They don't have these things. But I feel like, almost everybody who has some, ability to understand, what I was saying about love and these things, people who are listening to this and it makes sense, then it just becomes about your effort. Like, how much are you willing to give up? How much willing to sacrifice to where your relationship to God? And I think most people would probably, have a higher capacity to I would hope they would, to do that. But what I see now is people can't even deal with the most remedial truths. They can't even accept that the system's fucked. They can't accept that there's divinity within them, and and what that means. They can't ascend and transcend their religion. So we're fucked. People like are just I mean, like bare minimum. Like I feel like I'm doing the bare minimum. Like what it means to be a spiritual person, what it means to be on a spiritual path, what it means to be a true human being, an honest human being. What I'm doing is like bare minimum, and like people can't even fucking do that, right? So we're fucked. Like, I don't know if something will change that. I don't know, there's some like hidden evolution going on in some of the younger generations. Like it's going to emerge later, these indigo kids. I mean, I don't know. I hope that's all true. But right now, what I'm looking at in terms of humanity is like there's almost zero hope because people aren't even willing to do the bare fucking minimum, right? And they're not even willing to hear the bare minimum. They're not even willing to accept, people are going to be butthurt about whatever I say about this thing or that thing. They're not even willing to hear the truth about any of it. All right, so this is a long introduction. It's an hour. I'm going to go eat breakfast, and I'm going to put this rest of this video together. I have one more thing to add to it. The Lego thing I'll put at the end, and then I'll see if there's any comments to deal with, and I'll wrap this up. Here we go. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I had something I was going to say this morning. I couldn't remember what, but then I remembered it was Saturday, May 9th, my daughter Anna's birthday. And I'll talk about all that maybe in a little bit. But let's not start off on that note. Let's start off on this one. Jeffrey Epstein's suicide note for his second attempt. His real suicide has been found. I'm Jeffrey Epstein, and this is my suicide note. I'm so tired of this shit and what the liberal media are doing to my friend, crossed out, acquaintance, who never flew on my jet, Donald J. Trump. He is fully exonerated. I'm killing myself now. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Jeffrey Epstein. That was just great. Scientists warn virus may be disappearing too fast for vaccine studies to produce meaningful results. Scientists warn Virus studies may be disappearing too fast for vaccine studies to produce meaningful results. Well, that ain't a good headline because don't you really want the virus to disappear? Um, so I think this is the hantavirus thing. Um, but unless they misspoke on Fox News, then that seems very fishy, right? So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so this video is going up Monday morning, so I have 2 days to make one video. And I have to keep it open. Even if I made enough video today, there has to be some chance that there would be something significant that would happen later on today, tonight, um, or Sunday, all the way to Sunday night. So this is the juggling act they have to do. Generally, what I do is edit the whole video, and then if there's a breaking story, I decide where to put it. But whatever, because there's breaking stories all the time. And you remember not last Saturday, was it, how many Saturdays ago was it? 2 Saturdays or 3? That's a rhetorical question because I can't, unless you leave a comment after this video is made, it isn't going to be, there's no. But anyways, there was a fake assassination attempt on Trump, which is really not even being talked about. I mean, I don't know if he got his ballroom out of it, and I don't know, when there are small things like that aren't, they don't, I mean, why isn't that talked about more, right? I mean, Trump himself. Trump is the biggest talker of himself and everything around him. He's obsessed with himself and everything that happens to him, and he doesn't talk about Butler at all. In fact, when people bring it up, he tries to dismiss it. Not because he's being humble, but because he knows it's fake, right? And, now this story's disappeared. No real, anything. I mean, they all try to make something of it, and then, of course, it disappeared. But anyways, he said this.
Also working to make it easier than ever before to start a family by lowering the price of IVF, cutting regulatory battles and barriers, and fighting to bring down the cost of living so that more Americans can pursue the dream of, and it's a dream of living just a good life, maybe a great life. We cut drug prices now with the favored nations, most favored nations. We cut them by 70, 80, 90%. You could say 500%, 600, depending on the way you phrase the statement. But
yeah, you could say that. That's how words work. Yeah, you could say 1,000,000%. by the way you phrase the statement, you could say 1,000,000%. But what is it, right? Like there is an actual mathematical equation that could tell you what the prices were before you did whatever you did and what they are now. Joe Biden claimed the same thing, that he cut pharmaceutical prices, and you're just a bullshitter and a liar, and so was he. So my brother was a bullshitter, and I'm I mean, I'm a bullshitter here too, but I'm not, I work to tell the truth, and I don't have to exaggerate things. So there's, they're a little different. But my brother was like, and Trump was somebody he really liked and looked up to or whatever. And his oldest son, followed in his footsteps. He became a salesman, and he was a good talker. And I was talking to my nephew. This is probably like 10 years ago, my middle nephew. And I just talked to the older one. And I, said something about what my older nephew said. Is that true? And my middle nephew said, yeah, with my older nephew, you always have to subtract. Which is great, which you could also say about my brother. And you certainly can say about Trump. Whenever they're talking, especially about, only about something that's something great that they did, you always have to subtract, right? If he said, I scored 25 points and had 5 assists, it would be 12 points and 2 assists, right? like that kind of thing. and 3 turnovers, like, and then edited out the, the thing. And so, whatever this kind of, that's a basketball reference, but the Trump, you always have to subtract or whatever because he's always gonna. And does anybody listen to his bullshit anymore? Like when somebody's been bragging for so many years, like I've heard Trump brag more than I've heard anybody brag in my life. And there are athletes that brag, people who are in public life, and you have friends and people in your life that bragged, when they were younger. Not at this age, not 80 fucking years old. That's the other thing. Like he's too old to be bragging. Like an 80-year-old person, like usually they're beaten and whatever, or they've matured, whatever extent. But the guy brags like every time he talks, and I mean, depending on how much you listen to him, you would be like, this guy's fucking bragging all the time. Like, do you believe his fucking claims? Like, who believes Trump's claims anymore? Like, he just constantly is inflating them. Does his dumb fuck people still buy that shit? I mean, they have to know. They might like Trump. I mean, a lot of people like held their nose and just liked what Trump said, but didn't like him as a person because he was saying things that other politicians wouldn't say that they agreed with. But the guy is not fucking a humble person. So then there's this. MAGA evangelical leaders gathered this week at the Trump National Doral, Miami, to bless a towering gold statue honoring Donald Trump. Led by Pastor Mark Burns, Trump himself called into the event to thank Burns and the guests. And then there's this stuff here. So this is what Trump is. Here he is, right? Let me switch over here.
I want to make sure everyone can hear. Okay, sir.
Hello, everybody. I want to thank you so much for being there today, and more importantly, for what you did. The statue is beautiful. I saw it during the weekend. We had a big PGA tournament with a great champion, and all great champions, actually, but it was a great tournament, and I got to look at it very closely, and it's incredible, and I just want to thank you.
All right. So first of all, how fucked is this? Like, they're building golden statues of a fucking obscenely narcissistic president, right? Like, that's how fucked this thing is. Like, this is like our normal now. I mean, Joe Biden was fucking completely gone mentally. And Trump 1 was pretty fucked. Like, Trump 1 there was no other president that acted like Trump 1. And that's why he was my favorite character president. Like, he was a character in the show. Because Trump acted totally unpresidential, tweeting at people, getting into bullshit fights. It was really entertaining. I really enjoyed Trump 1 for the first 3 years. And then he just flamed out with, Operation Warp Speed and the whole thing, the election debacle, all the stuff that he did. But up until that point, he was great. Like, he was entertaining. So, there was that. But, this is where we're at right now. Now, I talk about how shitty the Bible is, that doesn't represent Jesus's higher teachings and his true purpose here, right? Like every spiritual person has one purpose. Every spiritual leader, every person who evolves spiritually. And the first, they have two purposes: to evolve as high as they can, and through that evolution, help others do the same. And in terms of their connection to God, like connect to God more and more, go further and further in there, develop their connection to God, and then help other people do the same. One part is their own spiritual evolution, and the other part is to help other people achieve the same thing. So you can be, a low-level saint, low-level spiritual person that's doing God's work. I think of a person who's a saint who does, more is more devoted to doing God's work than pursuing their own egotistical paths. So that's how I would qualify a saint, not with all this miracle bullshit, they do in the Catholic Church or whatever, like all that kind of stuff. But somebody who thinks enough about God, or more about God than themselves, right? Like, they have some ego and they have some, their own egotistical stuff, but the majority of their efforts and energies and life force goes into serving God. and that's a saint. Like that's it's not a hard thing to achieve. You just have to want it. Like I don't think there's that many people who are saints. Very small percentage. But it doesn't matter what religion you do or any kind of, you just have to put more of your life's effort into working for God than you do yourself, like your own ego. And, you know, um, all the saints want the same thing. And so Jesus certainly wasn't into this. And, as bad as the Old Testament is, the false idol worship, right? Put no idols before God. And this is idol worship, right? This is just straight up idol worship. And Trump is a worthless piece of shit. He's a demon, but he's also stupid. Like he's not a good demon, right? Like he's moronic.
It was done from love, and I want to thank Mark Burns, a pastor. He's a good pastor. He's a good man. I've known him a long time. He's been with me from the beginning, right from the beginning. Maybe.
Yeah, but too bad he's not with Jesus. Like, so you can see that, as bad as religions are at corrupting people and blocking their connection to God, religions become demonic. They're perverting, like in this case, Jesus' teaching. All the way that religions, start off with a spiritual person doing God's work, and then their message is compromised and used as a manipulative tool to enslave other people. And as bad as religions are, even to start off with, it gets to a stage where like they're not even, Santa Claus is more prevalent on Jesus' birthday. Satan Claus is more prevalent on Jesus' birthday. The Santa lie, the Santa, deception, is more prevalent on Christmas than Jesus is. And you have these people now worshiping like Trump and these other people. I mean, that's false idols, right? This is just all false idolatry.
About 2 days later, right? 2 days.
Right, Mr. President.
He was right at the beginning, and I appreciate it, Mark. You're great, and just really a good person. And I want to thank everybody there. I don't know.
Good person means he's been with Trump for a while and is loyal to Trump and tells Trump what he wants to hear and does what Trump wants to do. That's what a good person is to Trump.
There's a good crowd of people, but I want to thank you all, and I won't forget it. And we love you all, and the country's doing great, and Iran is not doing good because of us. They are not doing well at all.
Jesus Christ! Let's get off the statue for a little bit and talk about how I'm kicking Iran's ass.
And good things are happening, and I just want to really give you my love, and I wish I could be there where we want to make sure everything's going perfect on the war front. I think you can understand that, but we'll see you all around.
I think you can understand that I have to deal with this war thing, and I can't be there to celebrate this golden statue of myself. I think you guys understand. Like, I really want to be there, and this fucking statue of me putting my hand up in the air, the fight thing bullshit thing that I did. I really like to be there for my own statue unveiling. But I really can't. Like, there's a fucking war going on and fucking yada yada. Fucking.
Just want to again. It's everybody is taking pictures of it. Everybody is. My people told me that it's unbelievable. All day long they're taking pictures. They stand up next to it and they have their picture taken.
It's unbelievable. That's fucking. I mean, think about like that shit, right?
It really came out beautiful. I didn't know what to expect. I just want to thank you all, and we love you all, and God bless America.
God bless you, sir. God bless you. We love you. God bless you, Mr. President. Love you, sir.
Love you. We'll talk to you soon. All right. If somebody said, "Hey, Paul, we want to make a statue of you," I would say no. Why the fuck would you want to do that? Like, so I'm not sure why people want statues. I mean, the idea is that some image of themselves will be, there for some period of time. Not eternal, but it'll last past their death. It's your body is a vehicle for this life, right? You have your body that's there for whatever it is, like a lifetime. Like your soul creates your body. And if you're do any kind of spiritual, you connect to God, you meditate, you find there's a stage that happened to me early on, if occasionally happens, where you realize you're dragging this body around, your soul is. And your soul, the sense of just the weight of your physical body and your material life. Like it's just heavy. Like it's, like that's why when you have these flying dreams and your soul's free of your body and your soul's just like going around and doing whatever. There's a stage which I haven't experienced. Master Chargy talked about how it's like he was walking around and felt like, his feet were where his head was, like he was floating above his body. So you have your physical body. And it's a burden. Like, it's just a burden. You got to eat. You got to breathe. Like, and the older you get, when you start having health issues, like, things I've been talking about, there's a burden there. And you are a soul. And I talked about when I was 10 years old, my grandfather died, 10 or 11, I'm not sure. I tried to figure out whatever it was. I think it was 10 and a half. And my grandfather died, and I looked at him, and I'm like, he's not, we're at his wake. And, he's a big, tough guy, fought in 2 world wars. He was like, really interesting, kind of, whatever. And they put lipstick on him. And then, but even without the lipstick, I'm like, my grandfather's not here. That's just like a slab of human meat, right? It's it's a, whatever. It's like he's gone. Like my grandfather's gone. Whatever I called my grandfather, his physical, his spiritual essence, his soul was gone. And so, like, it doesn't matter. And these statues and, whatever it is, I mean, like I have remember when they were taking down Saddam Hussein's statues? Like, I'm not sure what level of maturity. It's a low level that you would want statues. Like, you're a person who, wants to, hey, everybody, I want everyone to remember me and, like, what I look like. Like, these wax museum things and whatever. Like, it's just, like how materialistic you have to be to think that that's a good thing. Like to, like how happy he is to have this fucking golden statue. And remember, he put that thing up about the Gaza stuff with his statues, right? And he's not golden. Like, I mean, he's a gross job of the head motherfucker. Like, he's just fucking gross. All right, so that's Donald J. So this is just great. Release the Epstein files. The flying saucer. That was wonderful.
So you say during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Oh, that's good.
All right. He's joking, but that doesn't mean he won't do it, right? Like, he'll say he's joking, and people will say he's joking, but that doesn't mean he won't fucking, violate his whatever it is, right? Okay, so this is Marco Polo Rubio. Jesus Christ, his ears are like 1/3 the size of his tiny little head. All right. Well done, Marco. I was going to say violate the Constitution, what I was saying before about Trump. He'll totally violate the Constitution and insert himself as king, right?
Well, I guess, but the point is, if there's not much seizing in the firing, because we
well, you should ask that of the Iranians. Don't ask me. We didn't fire. They fired on us. My point is, if you fire at a U.S. Navy ship, what are we supposed to do? Say, oh, there's a ceasefire. We're not going to shoot down your drone. That's a stupid question. That's a stupid position to take.
No, the position he's taken is that's not a. They're not saying don't shoot him. Now, first of all, this is just retarded. It's not. He's saying it's not a ceasefire if you guys are firing at each other. A ceasefire would mean you're not firing anymore.
Of course we fired back at them. They were shooting at us. That's what I would expect to do. Only stupid countries don't shoot back when you're shot at. And we're not a stupid country.
Yeah, but you were complaining about them illegally doing the Strait of Hormuz, taking control of it. That's not fair and that's not right, whatever. That, the war should be fought on your terms. Like, these little bitches, right? These little, immature bitches. But the guy just asked you a reasonable question. If you're firing each other, how is it a fucking ceasefire, you moron? Ceasefire would mean, hey, everybody, cease firing. No more fucking firing. And if somebody fires, the ceasefire is broken. and Iran isn't really ceasefiring. Whether they're doing it first or you're doing it first doesn't matter. It means there's no ceasefire.
Expect that there, or have you conveyed any red lines to Iran where, if the ceasefire or whatever you call it,
Whatever you call it. Occasionally ceasefiring, mostly ceasefire.
Bro, the red line is clear. If they threaten Americans, they're going to get blown up. I mean, that's how much clearer can you be than that? If you are a missile launching guy, whatever
Missile launching guys, those guys, whatever they're called, those guys.
can you be than that? If you are a missile launching guy, whatever they call that job, and you're sitting there and
I think it's called missile launching guy. I'm pretty sure that's a technical term.
you fire a missile at the United States and we saw you fire it, we're going to hit you. Of course we are.
If we see you over there, and if you do it like we don't see you, then we're like, fuck, where are you? Hey, missile launching guy, stop fucking hiding.
Who doesn't do that? Unless you want to get your ship sunk. I mean, we're not going to let our ships get sunk by the Iranians.
By missile launching guys? Fuck that guy. Fuck those guys.
With their little, their drones that they're firing.
Their little drones and fucking missiles and shit like that. Fuck that guy.
They don't have a navy anymore. But they bring out these little Boston whaler fishing boats and they try to swarm you. We're going to blow those boats up if they're
We're going to blow the fucking boats up. You fucking blow those boats.
coming towards our boats. I don't know if that's a red line, but I hope they know it is by now. So if I were one of these Iranians on a fast boat and they tell you, hey, your mission is to go after a U.S. destroyer, you're probably not going to survive. I think that's a red line.
That's a red line. That's a fucking red line. If you're a missile launching guy or a fast boat driving guy or a fucking a water skiing guy with a fucking or putting a mine in the water guy, we can fucking get you guys. We can fucking get you guys. Come on, what the fucking thing? Marco Polo. Okay, so I saw a meme that said, "Watch pastors pray over Trump statue," but there was no video. It was just the picture of the statue. But here, Pastor Mark Burns had the honor of leading Donald J. Trump's statue dedication event today at Trump Doral, Miami. Miami, mission accomplished, Mr. President. There they are praying over this fucking idol worship and bullshit, right? Here they are, whatever. There's a couple rabbis there. There's a pastor. Fucking here. This is the Ten Commandments where Moses throws the Ten Commandments at the statue of Baal. I used to love that movie. I should watch that again. Here it is. Watch pastors pray, but there's no video here. I don't want to accept all. So there was that. But like holy fuck, right? What's happening? Here's another flying saucer. Get rid of this music so it's fucking copyrighted. Release the Epstein files. Pedo. It didn't burn the pedo in. People are getting it done with the fucking release the Epstein files, you pedo. All right, so there's that. Okay, it's kind of a light day. I was going to say this at the beginning of the video, and I couldn't remember what I was going to say this morning. My lightheadedness is gone. I ate a little bit more food last night, which was counterproductive to me losing weight. It's the whole fucking thing. But I'm digging the cayenne pepper, and I feel my heart's been, really almost non-existent in terms of the irregular heartbeats, like very subtle. Sometimes I would get a pounding beat, like one or two, and then, of course, when it would just start going and not shut off, and then just escalate. But anyways, enough of that stuff. So I looked at the day, and today is Saturday, May 9th. So my first child was born, my son was born on Mother's Day, May 10th. And it was, big event, a lot of energy. And then the following year, my daughter Anna was born on Mother's Day, May 9th. She was born like 4 minutes before midnight. So they both could have been born on Mother's Day, May 10th. Totally different experience. We had a great doctor and a great nurse who used to be a midwife. Very quiet, peaceful. The first one was very chaotic. Same hospital, but different experience. And then my fourth child was born on May 17th and was a home birth, and I delivered him. So we had 3 birthdays in May. And May is always a great time of the year. I'm a summer person. You know, my birthday's in July. You know, I grew up going to Florida with my family and just, you know, being in Connecticut where the summer was like 2 months, like July and August, a little bit of June, you know, a week in September maybe. And you know, so I've been mostly a summer person, but I love the spring. I like all the seasons. You know, I like 4 seasons. But you know, I like the elongated summer, and I do well. And you know, I do but well when I have a tan, when I have a lot of time outside in the sun. Like I'm a sun person, right? So, anyways, May was always a big month in our family, and I look forward to it every year. Like 3 birthdays, kids' birthdays, and I work to make the kids' birthday special. So it was always, you know, this time when you know the family was, I don't know, the spring would be happening, and we'd be farming, and you know, it was a good time. Like we'd be stuck in the winter, you know, in the house all year, and then all winter, and then you know, you'd be, I don't know, like it was just like you know the best month because of you know just all the memories of the children being born. You know, those are big significant days in your life. And now it sucks for me because you know my daughter Anna committed suicide, and I have no relationship with my older son. You know, it's now coming around to being Mother's Day, May 10th. And I realized he was 28. I was like, holy shit, right? And my you know, younger son is 23, and you know, and at the 17th, you know, so a week from that day. And you know, kind of a bummer, you know. And my daughter Anna was also born on Mother's Day. Like she was born on Mother's Day, May 9th, following Mother's Day, May 10th. So that was the whole thing. But now, like, you know, it's gone from being like was something I look forward to, just like, you know, or now just a reminder of my family failing and my non-relationship with my kids, you know, like fucking, you know, so it's whatever it is. I feel pretty good today. So I'm in a light mood and, you know, joking around when I'm making the videos clip so far. So, I mean, it isn't like, you know, every day is different, like just because it's a anniversary of something and, you know, but I could always celebrate the early years, you know, when my family was better than it was, you know, when it ended up. And, you know, the early years when we first started farming, and like I remember going to, we created one homestead, then we moved deeper into the country, and we moved, it was, we were in Virginia at the time, and we moved, we bought a farm that wasn't fenced. So we were moving 4 cows and chickens and goats, and my son and I had very little experience doing it. I'd only done one fence with somebody helping me who knew what they were doing. And my son and I went to this house, our new house, and we didn't know the house was, the previous owner had committed suicide or was murdered. So, you know, and the house seemed like it was sometimes like haunted. And, you know, that was the whole thing. Like there was negative energy, spiritual energy, whatever. It was a weird house. So, you know, and I want to tell the whole story about like all of it. But my son and I went there to put in the new fence, and I had an air mattress, and I knew I needed a good night's sleep or I would be wrecked. You know, because, I mean, I didn't have a cell phone, and I had to make a mental map of the place. So this is probably 2000, I would say 2005 or 6. Probably 6, because I started the YouTube channel the next year, 2007. So that's, and I had to make a mental map of the place, you know, like how to get to Lowe's or, you know, whatever it was, you know, the stores that we needed to get to. You know, I had to figure out where we were in relationship to all the places we needed to go to build the fence. Like we had a big 16-passenger van, and I had to load up fencing and fence posts and, you know, all these things. And so the air mattress kept on deflating all night. And I was like I didn't sleep well. And there was, in the living room, there was a nice finished hardwood floor. But at one part, it was white. There was a white spot where they had rubbed the finish off. And I was like, well, that's a weird thing. It was right by the front door. It was about 3 feet in circumference. And later on, we found out that's where the woman shot herself in the head. But the weird part was she belonged to the Hemlock Club. And so this was a woman who grew up in this town, and she bought the house. She went to like Washington, D.C., which is about 5 hours away, and she worked there and, was a fairly successful person there, and came back and bought her childhood home. And I know there was alcoholics there because we had this broken down barn, this old broken down barn. And in the barn, there was fucking like all these bottles of alcohol that had been hidden in the like rafters, like old time bottles, and it seemed like the people there might have been depressed, and so she was there, and she ended up getting 60 cats. And when we went to buy the house, it reeked of pine sol. And so the the lawyer who was in charge of the sale, because our realtors totally like fucking like there was these people started showing up, and I'll just go through that briefly before we get back to the whatever it is. But this woman who showed up. Well, let's tell that part of the story. So these women showed up. Well, the first thing that happened was the lawyer said that we'll get back to the realtor thing in a bit. The lawyer said she had cats, and he said like 20. But what it was there was 60 cats, and there was a depressed area. There was a little well house where they used to have a spring, like a spring house, and spring water used to flow into it, or cold water from the well. I'm not sure which. We never could turn it back on. And there was a little vat of cement block that could hold about 8 inches of water, so 6 inches of water. And it's where they would put the milk. Like it was like a kind of a refrigerator in like old times. And it wasn't really used. We used it to milk the goats. It's a cute little shed. And between that, it was like on the side of the house. And then next to that, there was this area that there used to be a building. And in the room, what we use as an office room, there was a part of the floor had been cut out, and they had put plywood over it. It was just over this hardwood floor. And the reason was there was a doorway, and there was something messed up on the siding outside. And what she had done was she had constructed a hole in the house. She cut a hole in the floor, and then made a little tunnel that went out to this cat house. And she had 60 cats that we used to come back in and out of the house. In the house, they had sprayed pine sol everywhere. And then the pine sol started to fade away. And, fucking cat smell, cat pee. And we had to, like, I had to spray, like, they have this stuff that is like organic, some kind of, it breaks down like urine, like on a chemical level, but it's or some organic stuff, some citrus stuff, and whatever. And I would just spray the beams in the basement because cat pee had smoked through the whole fucking house. And it took like 2 years, and we got a wood burning stove, and the wood burning stove dried everything out for us to get the cat pee smell out of there. There was this hutch, and we got rid of the hutch, and we removed the hutch out. The whole place was like soaked in like cat. It was just fucking gross. So then there was this, they have these tractor supply stores or farm, southern state stores that are farm stores. They're like hardware stores, but they have farming stuff. And you also get like, farming fencing and, and feed and things like this. They're particularly for farmers. And there was a southern states that was like in a big town near us, like we were in a smaller town. But there was a local place, and that was a little bit closer, and it was owned by this really old guy. And he asked us where we lived, and I told him. And he pulled me over the side, like almost whispering. He goes, "They tell you about the suicide." Because everybody fucking knew, like but us, that this woman had killed herself, and this guy who's really immoral bought the house and flipped it to us. And the realtors that we had didn't tell us that there had been a suicide. And so this guy was like whispering, kind of like people knew that we had been deceived, right? So then my ex's daughter did some dancing, like some kind of thing. I forget it was theatrical or something. And there was a doctor, a local doctor, who used to pick her up and drive her. They were part of some kind of thing. I can't remember the specifics. And the doctor wanted to come into our house, and she said she was the coroner, and she came in and identified, looked at the body. And she looked at that spot where that spot I told you about earlier, where there had been soaked in blood, and they had sanded it out and just left a unfinished part of the floor, right? Like didn't redo the whole floors or whatever, and so there was just a spot there. And they might have had a rug over it or something when we looked at the house, like some kind of fucking shitty seedy shit that they did. So there was that, and then there was these 4 women that came up to our house, like we met one of them, my ex did or something, and then they all came over, and they said, we think she was murdered because she had a boyfriend and they used to fight all the time. And the boyfriend came in and was allowed, but he was friends with some of the cops, and was allowed to take her answering machine message tape. So like he tampered with evidence. And these 4 women across the street from us down this like dirt road, they were capturing stray dogs or dogs that people let out, and they were selling them to pharmaceutical companies. And the chief of police or something was involved with it, like they were corrupt. And these women were trying to fucking Nancy Drew this thing and break the story. And this woman was kind of leading it, the woman who owned the house. And she was shot. She shot herself, but there was no like suicide note. And she belonged to the Hemlock Society. Hemlock is poisonous. And they said if she was going to do it, she would have done that. And they had just, there was no indication of anything was going to go on. Like they were pretty sure she was murdered. And there was multiple suspects. Each one of the women had a different, people that they were suspicious of. But they knew that this woman was, her ex-boyfriend and the dog fucking traffickers. I mean, it's all this shit. And then some guy showed up. And he bought, we sold our basketball pool because we didn't really have a good place for it. I tried to make a paved area, but it didn't work. And so we sold our basketball pool to some guy on eBay, Craigslist. And he came over and said, you guys have a ley line here, which is supposed to be a spiritual point. And the area that we lived was known as like a spiritual place with a lot of quartz and crystal, like it's built sort of on a mountain. So one of these supposed to be power points. But he said that the energy was very intense there. And he showed back up with a bunch of these resin things. They were resin things with little copper, conductors of electricity or something. He started burying them around our house. And we knew that the energy was fucked there. It was intense. And my ex was flipping out. She was going nuts. And so there's, more to the story. But my son and I, so we show up at this place not knowing any of this. And we put in 300 feet of fence, and it was a whole thing. And then the family joined us, and it was, when we came back home, we came back and drove everybody there. And then we had, the cows had a place to be, and it was kind of a cool thing, right? So there's accomplishments. We built straw bale barns and, all these things. And I documented this in the early stages of this YouTube channel. And so there's, was good things that happened. But they kind of got erased by, how much of a failure it ended up being, right? Where there's, we have a broken family and just all of it. My ex being the major, contributor to that because she was fucking mentally ill and abused by her, her parents. I was thinking about this the other day. That her and her brother. So that she had a sister and a brother, and her and her brother attributed, her dad sexually offended her according to her story. Which, the brother confirmed, so I know that happened. And he was kind of a successful CEO of a company. And he, physically abused her, he used to at least spank her or whatever, I don't know, whatever that is. But he was considered the better of the 2 parents and the more reasonable one. Because their mom was batshit crazy, and they both thought the mom was worse. So how do you be worse than a sex offender? That's So that was her parents, and she was, fucked. She was broken person. And the whole thing. I mean, I benefited going through this in various ways. A lot of the knowledge that I have here came from that experience. My ex had some, positive qualities, and knew about natural health care and things, and some things like there's some benefit that came out of that as well. Mostly a spiritual cleaning, just going through something. I mean, it was depressing. Every time we had an argument, my ex would pull out a knife and threaten to kill herself or do any kind of bullshit stuff, right? Like it was crazy. And I've talked about this extensively in other videos. But there was some part of me that was allowed to believe. Like I believe then and I believe now that this was God's path for me. Like it was unpleasant, but I benefited from it. It was something I had to go through for whatever reason. Like you have to go through bad shit in your life, even if you're not on a spiritual path. But there are things you have to endure to, to become a more spiritual person. Like you have to endure things. And, I mean, it's just whatever you get. Like, my thing was crazy, but, people get, horrible things in their life, difficult things to go through, undesirable things that have, unbelievable spiritual benefit and unlock things and clean things out and whatever. So, I was fully convinced then and now that I was supposed to endure that situation. I mean, everything that I've been through in my life, I believe is part of a plan, and I'm, as sure of that as I am of anything, right? But, the idea was that at some point my ex would just get better. Like she would, that spiritual energy and this transmission and everything. And that, she was a good person with who had been abused and was working to correct that. But then I realized she wasn't. She really loved being a victim. And she really, never took responsibility for any of it. And she, somebody who does a Sajmark system, I read this Whispers of the Brighter World in my last video, where, you have to believe everything comes from God. But my ex couldn't do that with her, abuse and all the things that she thought victimized her throughout her life. And so she wasn't really practicing the system, even though she pretended to be. Because the first thing you have to do is believe that God has a plan. You don't believe in God if you believe somehow randomly some wrong shit was done to you and you didn't deserve it, right? Most of the bad things that happen to you come from things that you did in a past life. And there's a correction. There's something that feels like a punishment, but it's a correction, right? And she could never deal with it. So that made her like a fraud in terms of she really never became a spiritual person. Like she pretended to do the practice and she read the books, but she never embraced this one essential thing, was that, everything that happened to her when she was a kid was something that was created from past situations that she was in and something that she carried over into this life, right? And that, that's, you have to be grateful even for the worst abomination for things that happen to you. Because when you're ungrateful for it, then you have to endure it again. Like you have to go through these things and somehow be grateful for them, right? So that's a difficult thing for people to do, and she, didn't even allow that idea to penetrate into her system. And so, I believe that at some point that things were going to get better, things were going to go one way or the other, and they were going to go the positive way. Because you always, believe they're going to go the positive way. Because that's just how the human being is. It's demotivational to believe it's going to fail. It's hard to wake up every day knowing that you're doomed. Like it's impossible. Like you have to believe that it's going to be successful. You have to, even if you're toiling, which we were every day on the farm, things seemed to be going in the wrong direction. But I was like, well, hopefully that'll turn. But it never did. And we were homesteading and homeschooling our kids based in not only the Whispers prophecies, but, all the stuff that was in the Sajmark system about this time right now. And we thought that this was like a research project that would be valued by the people in the mission and that it would be something that, they could build on. Like we were pioneers and innovators and, they would see what we were doing because, there's these prophecies and there's this, description of a time that was coming that was, a collapse of the civilization and, all the things that we're seeing happen now. But it became clear that the majority of people who did the meditation didn't want any part of that and were mad that we were doing it because it was making them think about things they didn't want to think about. They read the prophecies and they dismissed them, or they said that's going to be a long time from now, or that doesn't have anything to do with us, or whatever it is, right? They found some way to rationalize it, and so the whole thing turned out to be, a failure in one way. But I have all this knowledge and information and experience that I certainly can carry on to my next existence, and I can, talk about here. So there was value to it, like it was, but not the original, the original idea of how things were going to work out. Like if I was going to daydream about a future, how everything was going to play out, it wouldn't have been this that it happens now. But I'm happy with it. It's been great. I'm grateful for it all. How it turned out. But like I had no idea, and certainly that I would not be talking to my kids. So it's like a past life that ended poorly, and anything that brings it back up is kind of a bummer. But I feel pretty good today either way. But sometimes in life you will deceive yourself to do God's work. And you can see this with, say, Trump, who is bringing down a system that's demonic. But everybody who's around Trump and Trump himself thinks that there's going to be some glory and some success, and some, guy who's been, a bankruptcy magnate is somehow going to turn that shit around and finally succeed at something in his life, right? Other than grifting and stealing from people and just being a piece of shit, right? So, people have to believe what they're going to believe, even though, I think that's what's one of the great things about the Field of Dreams movie, is that this guy's, got this divine vision, and he builds this field, and, and he's like, what's in it for me? Because, like, he's done all this stuff and endured it all, and then, he followed the instructions, and it didn't seem to be anything in it for him. And the guy says, what do you mean? Why'd you do? You did it for yourself, right? This is, when you do God's work, you just do it, and you don't worry about what the outcome is. Like, you just follow what your God's instructions, and then you let go of the. That's one of the key teachings of Sajmark's system. You do the work, and the results are God's. The work is yours, and the results are God's. The fruit of your labor is not yours, right? The fruit of your labor is God's. And so, like, it's very liberating. Like, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. You just do the work and focus on doing the best job you can with gratitude and, a sense of humility and service, and that there's a broader plan. And whatever way it works out, it works out. And so, you don't feel resentful. You don't feel put upon. You don't feel screwed over. You feel like, I'm grateful to do God's work, right? The another Sajmark teaching, the reward for work is more work. It's not a vacation. It's not money. It's not, those things are there. But the reward for work is more work, right? Like, especially when you're working for God. God gives you more work and higher work. Oh, you completed that? Okay, here, do this, right? Oh, you did that so well, here, do this, right? So you take on more work. And you're grateful to be useful, like that you're useful to God, that you have some purpose and some usefulness, and that, all the depression and all the things that people have now following a false path and false goals and, entitlements and all the, shit that goes on now with American life, and all these kids growing up on medications, all that stuff disappears because you feel useful, and that's one thing that I thought my kids received, that they were contributing, they were milking out cows, and they were doing things, and they were actually, contributing to the family. And, if anything came out of that for them that was good, it was that, right? That they got a chance to learn skills and participate. And, as everything unfolds, when we went through the flood in Chennai, several people remarked at how well my kids were doing. And I'm like, yeah, they're prepared. Like, they were prepared for this kind of thing. My kids thrived in the, flood in Chennai. And so that was, at least something I felt good about. Anyways, all right, let's move on to the other stuff here. So Sunday, May 10th here. When I talk about the collapse, or I talk about the transition, because transition is, something that's a better word. Because, what we're doing right now isn't working. And so there has to be something better, and it has to align with God's will. because that's where we've gone off for obvious reasons. But my wife sent me this. Apparently, Elon Musk did a interview with Lex Friedman. He said, we have up to 2027. And I wanted to preface this by saying, the people who control the system, they're going to lose control. Like, that's a big part of it. Like, people recognize that the people running the system are horrible and demonic and lost and, are self-destructive and insane, whatever it is. And so that has to stop. And when their control ends, the system ends. I mean, they've made it so that way, right? The system as we now know it. Because, the system is based in selfishness and narcissism and, anti-God stuff, right? So let's listen to this with that idea in mind.
So this was a rehash of some things that Elon said in a Lex Friedman interview. And there's something in this tweet where they say some lines were deleted. I don't know if that means he YouTube editor it or something, but if you go to the top deep, I just want to... After 2027, there will be no way back. Elon Musk said this in a podcast with Lex Friedman, a line that was later cut. When asked why, he fell silent for almost a minute.
Fuck, that's a scary minute.
Then he quietly said, shout out to Lex for letting him sit there with that, though. It's pretty heavy. Then he quietly said, it's not a catastrophe, it's a transition. The transcript left behind 3 themes that gave him away: autonomous intelligence, loss of meaning, and energy independence. It all sounded like a forecast, but now reads like a diagnosis of the era. The first sign is the collapse of attention. Musk said humanity will stop thinking in cycles. Planning for the future will shrink to the horizon of updates. That line hits me hard. People will stop building and start simply replacing. MIT research confirms a generation born after 2000 holds attention for about 8 seconds, less than a goldfish. I used to say that to Alessi, but he's gotten a lot better now. Musk called this cultural Alzheimer's. We're not losing memory, we're losing the ability to think. The second sign is artificial intelligence that no longer obeys. Musk says when a system starts correcting humans, that time of linear logic is over. Even now, algorithms...
All right, so, the idea that he said 2027 is it would, again, I don't even know if this is true. Like this, you can't find this in the original interview they've said, so they've cut this out. But Elon Musk said, again, not that he's to be trusted or he is, a knower. I mean, but he is an insider. And he said when he was doing Doge, and I have that meme, I'll play that meme at the end of this clip. He said that, something I was talking about earlier in terms of bankruptcy and the rest of that stuff, right? And so he said that we would, by, if we didn't correct the debt-based system now, and, we start paying down on the debt, we would be bankrupt. But we're bankrupt already. He was lying. And he said that we had to trim $1 trillion, which was just the interest. Then it was only 500,000. And then before you know it, it's, almost nothing. And we're spending more money, like Trump spent more money, on top of whatever Doge saved. It didn't seem like Doge even worked. Doge was probably more of a scam. But Elon Musk said that we'd be bankrupt if we don't do something quickly because we have $1 trillion of interest. And so let me play that Elon Musk meme here.
The overall goal here with the Doge team is to help address the enormous deficit. We simply cannot sustain as a country $2 trillion deficits. The interest rates, just the interest on the national debt, now exceeds the Defense Department spending. We spend a lot on the Defense Department, but we're spending over $1 trillion on interest. If this continues, the country will become de facto bankrupt. It's not an optional thing, it is an essential thing. That's the reason I'm here. And taking a lot of flack, and getting a lot of death threats, by the way. I mean, I'm like, stack them up, But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done. And I'm confident at this point, knock on wood, knock on my wooden head, there's got a lot of wood up there, that we can actually find $1 trillion in savings. That would be roughly 15% of the $7 trillion budget.
So this popped, this was recommended, I don't know, a couple days ago, and I ignored it, but now Trump goes back on his promise of Doge checks. tariffs replacing taxes and lowering inflation and price of gas, instead gives flavored vapes that entice children, or give fruit-flavored vapes that entice children. It gets worse practically every day. You know, there was some belief that Trump would make good on, at least partially make good, or do something that would, would be a part of his promises and the Make America Great Again, you know, various talking points. And it's clear that that's not the case, right? Trump has got a completely different agenda, and his whole thing is, trust me, I'm great, and you guys see how great I am, and you guys should just trust me, and I'm the greatest, and I'm the only one willing to do this, and I'm doing what needs to be done, right? And so, going back to the Elon Musk thing, either Elon Musk is talking about what he sees, and he's just saying by 2027 we're fucked, or whatever. It's a transition because he's not fucked, right? Like at least these people think they're not. They're until the power gets wrenched from their cold dead hands, right? The people I call the controllers. But it's whether he's forecasting something or he's just reading, he's a part of a plan, and he's in the know, and these people are planning this thing that's about to happen, right? And that he knows that this is going to happen by 2027. But either way, it's going to happen. And a lot of it's going to be out of the control of anybody who's any human that's powerful or not, right? It's just the end of something, something where people's souls, and even on an egotistical level, people are craving change. So let me segue into this song here. Okay, so my wife sent me this morning, and it's probably my favorite tune and the Lego video from Iran thus far. Not because I give a shit. Nothing. It's not new information to me. I don't believe that all of it's even true. Whatever. It's none of that. But let me just play it here.
Look up at the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, dropping UFO files just to mess with your brain. Blurry little saucers while the economy dies, but you'll keep the Epstein list in the dark with the lies. Yeah, it's the weapon of mass distraction. Look at the stars to avoid the reaction. Keep the fake aliens, we calling your bluff. Show us who went to the island, yeah, we had enough. Mr. President play.
So I like the tune. It's a catchy tune. Like, they've done a good job with the AI. It's AI songs, right? They're creating AI songs. And I don't give a shit about the Epstein Island. Like, I covered this so many years ago, long before people took interest in this. And Trump flat out admitted that Jeffrey was a terrific guy, and, all these things. In fact, that's kind of my introduction to Jeffrey Epstein, was Trump's quote. Around that time. I found out about it in 2014 or 15 when I first, showed you that stuff. So that's, over 10 years ago. And I saw the revival of the Epstein files, and then it become popular for the late to the party motherfuckers, and then then what it's become now. And I know that none of these things are going to, it's never going to be satisfactory. They're never going to tell you the truth. There's never going to be accountability. So I'm over all these things. And I'd like to see more about the UFOs, but I know they're not going to release the truth about that. So none of these things are, these are things I knew about 10 years ago. But it's still great, right? And also, I look forward to these Iranian Lego videos, and I'm rooting for Iran and to win on the Strait of Hormuz, which is counterproductive to me and as an ego, as an American, and the rest of us. Trump sucks so bad, because Trump's success would mean American success, at least, in terms of his failure certainly means, his success is more about him and his buddies making a profit. The reason he sent Jared Kushner in there to negotiate is because he wants Jared Kushner to get a deal like he got. Jared and Ivanka got a $2 billion deal from the Saudis, right? Jared Kushner is a non-crack smoking Hunter Biden. And so, Trump is they privatize the proceeds, the assets, the profit, and they socialize the cost. So we pay for the cost, but they get the profit, right? But even with that, Trump, failure in Iran and then all the other failures that are all what Trump's doing is going to bring down America. And I know on a divine level that's what should happen. That's God's will. But on a human level, not so much. But it's getting to the point where Trump sucks so bad and America sucks so bad, people are rooting against America, even though, these videos are manipulative and, Iran isn't a great country and their leadership sucks and they have their own, in terms of the culture, people might be great, but they have their own corrupt government, their own bullshit. But, in this kind of battle, it's like, well, why would you ever root for Trump? Like, Trump is a lying piece of shit and they're bombing kids, right? When you have to root against your own country, then you're rooting for collapse, whether you're really conscious of it or not, right?
Hero with a classified stash, but the footage looking like it was recorded on trash. 144 pixels of a smudge in the clouds, and you throwing it like candy to the gullible crowds. Where the real files at? Oh, the CIA tripped you. Dyer stepped in and they suddenly zipped you. No spaceships, no bodies, just a weather balloon. Selling tickets to a movie that is ending too soon. I'm the man of the truth, nah, PR machine. The cheapest magic trick that the world ever seen. Trying to shine a little object so we follow the beam, while you hide the real monsters in the back of the scene. Bring it back to the ground where the pockets are peaking. Crime on the corner while the podium's speaking. Gas prices up, inflation is wild. So you point at a comment like you tricking the child. And what's this about skipping the midterm votes? Changing up the maps just to keep you afloat. Talking about democracy but rigging the game. Pointing fingers at the world to escape your own blame. You say you want it fair, but you alter the lines. American dream looking like a series of crimes. You want us looking up while the country is burning. But the wheels of the truth, yeah, they constantly turn. Look up at the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane. Dropping UFO files just to mess with your brain. Blurry little saucers while the economy dies. But you keep the Epstein list in the dark with the lies.
So, that's what's up, right? So I'm going to wrap this one up here. I don't know if there's any comments we're going to get to. But, this is where we're at. Like, I think the majority of people, at least some, significant number of people, are rooting against Trump and rooting against us in this war, like our own self-interest, right? Because, America's going to get embarrassed, and we're getting embarrassed, or, whatever's happening here. We'll see how it plays out. But, it's hard to fucking, almost impossible to root for this motherfucker. All right, which is, you're rooting for collapse. Like, people are kind of craving something different. Whether they can put a finger on it, they're just over the fucking bullshit, right? And, there's a lot of good things or a lot of things that make our lives easier that will be given up. But, it's just time. It's fucking, it's just bad. There's just nothing to hang your hat on. There's nothing to say, well, this is hopeful or this is good. Anyways, let me edit this and get it up on YouTube's, and then we'll, I'll move on. This is a video be up Monday morning at 8, and now, like I said, I'll do some kind of ending here with this voiceover. I had a really good day. My wife and I, it's Mother's Day. We did some work outside. My wife's planting, work in the garden, which she really likes to do. We kayaked on our pond and a bunch of other things. Beautiful day. Just cut the lawn. So I got a lot of stuff done outside. I still have to put together a journey series video, so I'm going to wrap this one up here. I'm not going to read any comments. I just wanted to say, what I was saying in the beginning of the video about the whole thing with, whatever personal thing that I think about my own spiritual evolution and, my lack of, I should be the worst person, right? In terms of, it's not that hard for people to choose to have a relationship with God. But if what I'm saying is true, and it is, right, objectively, if it's what I'm saying is true, that the system is unfixable, which it is. You can't, it's not, it's everything. It's the morality, it's the debt-based economy, it's the, weird demonic shit, it's the weakness and how each generation gets weaker and weaker and more entitled, and kids being addicted to the internet now, all, not kids, everybody, right? Like fucking, the whole thing, how, we're not living the way we should and everything's going south and, this thing has to end and then something else has to take its place. And if there is a spiritual renaissance and a plan to elevate humans to a higher level of evolutionary, whatever it is, if that's true or not, I mean, that's more debatable than the collapse of the system. But if I'm saying what I'm saying is true about that, and that connecting to divinity is the solution, if all those things are true, and from my experience, I mean, there's, I believe it 100%. But, it's either true or it's not. But if it is true, then, why do I have so few views and why do people come and go and why isn't people doing more and why doesn't it inspire people to change? Not just me, but whoever says something similar. I mean, if, the truth community has any value, why aren't people working to change themselves, better themselves, come up with a plan B, adjust themselves, adapt, prepare, all those things? Why are people just, people just like to talk, like they just want to fucking talk and, complain or whatever it is and, gossip and, but people don't want to fucking do anything or change or or better themselves or, any of these things. Like, what, we see we're going in the wrong fucking direction. What do you have to lose? Like, what do people have to lose? I mean, just to try something or, do something different or just maybe this will work. Like, at least it's it's something that everyone can do is cultivate a relationship with divinity within them. People can all meditate. They can all, whatever. You can give it a shot, right? And, I mean, if you have nothing else, like, in terms of when you realize the voting, it doesn't work and all these sorts of things. And so that's what I was referring to. Like, it's, maybe people will change and maybe they need the right motivation or, things just have to, whatever has to happen, something will happen. And that's great. And I'm all for that. I'm not denying that possibility. But I will say, it doesn't look good right now. Like, it could look good in 10 years or 100 years or whatever. But things are happening and, we can see that there's an end of something. It's coming to an end. When I went through the divorce and I went through just really intense cleaning and, I had this bitterness towards God that had to get like yanked out and wasn't fucking pleasant. But, after I had that happen, after that was done for me, I just felt like a new person. But, I still had to reinvent my life, right? Like, the intergenerational family farms I'd hoped to achieve with my family collapsed, and all these other things. And, then Dodgy turned out to be a piece of shit, all those things. And the YouTube channel took off and I had to, deal with that, all that stuff. And so, I had to adapt, right? There's been several times in my life where I had to change everything, adapt. Everyone has to do it. Like when you first day of school, when you're going to kindergarten, right? You have to adapt to that. Your first job, your first relationship, you get married, you have, any kind of things. You have to adapt all the time. And, people just lose their ability to adapt and then they just crumble. They just collapse. And you see that. And, that's what's happening right now. Like, there's definitely a need to adapt and people aren't willing to do it. Changing people or, people changing themselves is the, the most difficult thing to accomplish because no one wants to do it, right? So that's what I was referring to in the beginning of the video. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely horn for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.